The deposed Emir of Kano, the former CBN governor, Samisi Lamido, visited the president at the Asaf Villa, of course, to facilitate with him and also used the opportunity to convey what he claimed to be the northern concerns bordering on economic and security and the well-being of the entire northern hemisphere. He pointed out vividly that he met with the president to salute his economic policies, which he has rolled out, and of course, bordering on the subsidy removal, which he has been an advocate of the subsidy removal for time, of course, immemorial. And another concern he raised was bordering on the 37 herdsmen, which he claimed was bombed by the military, possibly seeking for redress or compensation of his kinsmen. That was allegedly born or mistaken to be terrorists by the military. And the major concern he raised is the poverty-stricken northern hemisphere, that the concerns of the poverty rate in the north is quite alarming and should be an issue of national concern as far as the government of Asiwaju Ahmed Bola Tinubu is concerned. It should be a priority according to his submission. But that notwithstanding, can we put the record straight? Let's, of course, get to discuss these fundamental issues. But it bothers me most that the Eastern politicians don't even have regard for their people. You can imagine Sanusi going to Asarok to speak on behalf of 37 herdsmen, which he claimed was bombed by the military during their raiding operation. But several thousands of innocent Easterners has been killed, bombed, manned, even by the security operatives, and yet none of the politicians of the southern, of course, hemisphere deem it necessary to confront the government of Buhari with all the recklessness and rascality expressed by this same government of Buhari, where thousands of youths had lost their lives, and unfortunately, no one is there to speak for them. Could this, of course, send a very serious signal that the southern politicians, especially that of the eastern region, are more or less indifferent about the plight of an average southeastern Nigerian people or populace? How could the deposed emir of Kano, the former CBN governor, Lamido Sanusi, come to tell the government of Ahmed Bola Tinubu that the North is stricken with poverty? They have been within the corridor of power for the past 8 years. They have held power ever since independence for more than 40 years. And besides, let's look at the revenue allocation or sharing formula within the Nigerian system. The sharing formula of allocation or revenue based on the Nigerian template is, of course, decided based on the number of LGAs, local government areas or local government councils within Nigerian state. We have over all the number of local governments within the Nigerian state is 774 as of the time of this review. Yes, among the 774 local governments that is decided when the sharing formula or revenue is being invoked, the North Hemisphere has 419 LGAs, which means by statistics, the North enjoys more than 54% of the revenue generation or allocation in Nigeria. Meanwhile, the 45.86% goes to the entire southern hemisphere or southern protectorate, while the northern protectorate goes home with the allocation to the tune of 54.13%. Now, and the South has only 355 LGAs. Now, why the arguments being sustained that the North is poor, more poorer than any part of the states of Nigeria? This is a political miscalculation, and of course, a means devised to keep on reaping the Nigerian populace and deceiving them. There is no substantive claim why that should be. The North shouldn't be poorer. Rather, the North should be 8 points, more than 8% more richer than the South. But when you consider in terms of revenue generation, internally generated revenue, it is the South that has more than 71% generation of the revenue that is being shared at the center. And yet, when it comes to allocation, the larger bulk of the revenue generated goes to the north, the entire northern hemisphere, because of the number of local government allocated to the northern hemisphere. Now, if the northern political elite could not harness this advantage to better the lot of their own citizens or northern people, who should be blamed? If in a country, a region goes home with more than 54 point something percent of the revenue generated, internally generated revenue goes to them during the sharing process or allocation, then how could such region claim that they are still strikingly impoverished? By who? If the North claim they are impoverished, then it should be by the northern political elites, and no one should be blamed for that, not even the southern hemisphere. So the argument is that Tinubu, the president of Nigeria, Ahmed Bola Tinubu, who is from the south, should not be deceived by those endless rhetorics. Of course, they should look at the statistics of the sharing formula or allocation in the Nigerian state. I will advocate that His Excellency Ahmed Bola Tinubu will seek to, of course, redress the imbalance in the system called Nigeria in terms of how allocations are being shared. We have two major regions in Nigeria, the Southern Protectorate and the Northern Protectorate. My argument or submission is that the Ahmed Bola-led administration should seek to balance the injustice by ensuring that the Northern Protectorate have the same number of local government. I mean, the Southern Protectorate has the same number of local government as that of the Northern Hemisphere to strike a balance in the interests of equity, fairness, and of course, we have what we call a quota system where there is equal distribution of opportunities. So the same should be extended to the revenue allocation. It is no longer the days where the North will always take undue advantage of the South and still bemoan their insensitivity or inability to harness such opportunities to better the lot of their own people. Having extracted this point, you can understand that this is a mere political deception that the North have deployed, especially the northern political elites, in ripping off the entire country. If you enjoy 54 point something percent of the entire money generated, not minding that your input is minimal, but yet when it comes to allocation, you still go with the biggest. It's more or less like the idiom that's one walking like ants, but eventually eating like elephant. Why the elephant end up eating like an ant? Such injustice should be redressed and should be of great priority to the administration of Ahmed Bola Tinubu. Yes, there should be fairness, and the southern hemisphere should be treated with such fairness. Yes, and issues of insecurity, if there is any allocation to address security, it should be 50-50 to cover the southern protectorate and the northern protectorate. Time is gone when, of course, billions of dollars will be invested in the fight against terrorism, while in terms of generation of those funds, the North is found wanting. The money generated from the South is being used to execute the fight against terrorism, while the entire Southern protectorate lie in waste, making reference to the oil-rich zones of the eastern regions where they have been neglected, where the major, of course, chunk of the money that's being used to fight terrorism in the north is generated. Yet the southern hemisphere are left in shambles, devoid of any, of course, dividends of democracy. So the administration of Ahmed Bola Tinubu should seek to address this. And I hope, of course, that Lagos will get more LGS based on, of course, the percentage of internally generated revenue being accrued to the center, to the federal government. This should be the basis upon which, of course, there must be a review of the sharing formula to ensure fairness and equity so that Nigerians, every region will be encouraged. The North should look inwards and know that they are fundamentally, the problems of the North is fundamentally orchestrated by the Northern political elites who rip off their people and their region and get more richer than and impoverish the entire region. Now, just for instance, the Southeast has only 95 LGAs, local governments, while even the Northeast has more local government than the Southeast. The Northeast has 112 local governments. You can't imagine that. 112 local governments. By inference, the Northeast has more than 17 local governments greater than the entire Southeast. Just the Northeast. And the Northwest has even twice the number of local governments compared to the Southeast. The Northwest has 186 local government councils. So, and you still lament that you are more poorer than the Southeast, who only takes 95 LGAs in terms of revenue, and you take more, far better, higher, more double compared to what goes to the Southeast. So how could you still be crying that you are more impoverished, but in terms of revenue generation, you are far lesser in productivity? This is unacceptable and should, of course, be an issue of national concern. Indeed, the story is not in which states generated what. It is in the fact that over 70% of the total IGR, that is internally generated revenue, came from three regions, which is the Southwest, the South-South, and the Southeast. This has implications for so many things: internal immigration or interstate relocations will continue until some equilibrium is reached, because as human beings, Nigerians will continue to move to regions or states where there are more economic opportunities. Meanwhile, the intern northern politicians should seek how to address, of course, the incessant insecurity within the region that has plunged them, of course, into unimaginable abject poverty. They should build a more coherent and more conducive environment for people, of course, to come to do business. And the security of those coming to do business must be guaranteed by the northern political elites, who most of the time, of course, orchestrates most of the insecurity within the north, just to uh, exploit or to take of the national cake or siphon the federal coffers, which has turned invariably to be one of the worst nightmare or dilemma of the northern hemisphere, because people will not drift or relocate where there is uncertainty in terms of insecurity, and of course, which invariably will affect the economic opportunities within the region. So they should go back and seek and advise themselves. It is better one advises himself than seeking for attention where there is no attention. So my advice to the former CBN governor, Sanusi Lamido, is to go back to the north and address the northern hemisphere, that they are the architect of their problem and should not in any way blame the south. Why? Because they have the majority of the allocations going to the north. More than 54% of the Nigerian distribution of their wealth, of the Commonwealth goes to the North. And yet the North have nothing or less to show for it. It is quite alarming and unfortunate. And such unfortunate experience could not be allowed to strive if the North must get out of their feet. It is very clear that you generate less or contribute less is even most of the times the exploration of the mineral resources are not being remitted to the federal coffers. Citing, for instance, Zamfara State is one of the poorest region or state in the north, but they mine gold. And those golds are not being remitted. The sales of those or the proceeds of those goods are not remitted to the federal coffers. Individual political elites, state actors, share the money among themselves. Look at petroleum that is being harnessed from the Sambisa region, which is estimated that 1 kilogram of such a mineral deposit it is has a market value of more than $27 million, as revealed by the former as security advisor to the then president of military president Abacha. It is Mustafa. Then, if all these are happening, why should they not be crying? Who should they blame? That is the conspiracy of the northern political elites who unfortunately have ripped up their region, taken unto advantage of their people who are left with nothing or less to show for it. So, if Buhari has been from the north for the past 8 years and could not address insecurity bordering on the northern concerns, then, that is not to say that the current government should not look into such concerns. But then what is important is that the North should come in terms with the reality that they are the fundamental, of course, the architects of their problems. If they take the highest revenue sharing formula based on the Nigerian arrangement on templates, why should they still blame any other region for their poverty? Or called for their backwardness and retrogression? Despite the billions of dollars that have been invested in such regions, it is quite unfortunate, and this should not be allowed to continue. It is quite alarming and disturbing that the North will continue to wallow in such self-deception and denial of the gravity of these concerns. Yes, to this end, we call it a day in this section of Analytical Rumbles. We will continue to get you updated and intimated with the happenings as we bring your way unbiased reportage of events within the Nigerian socio-political and economic sphere. Thank you for watching. Thank you for your time. Until we come your way some other time.